Hello. So today we're going to be talking about Sonia G's Niji Pro. This was a brush that I didn't even consider for a very long time for a variety of reasons. And I kind of picked this up on a whim during one of Beautylish's sales. And honestly, I'm really sad that I didn't pick this up sooner because this is a fantastic brush and it does a lot of things that I've been trying to do with other brushes that I have, or well, I thought I was successful with, but this just does it so much better. So anyway, if you are someone going on a low buy or no buy, this is probably not a good video for you. I am very, very happy and impressed with this brush. So if you're someone who is weak to picking up things once people start talking very positively about them, um, this is probably not a safe video for you. I'm very pleased with this and I'm considering picking up another one. So let me bring out some brushes that I'm going to compare this to, and then we can get into the video. All right, so I've brought out a number of brushes that I want to sort of compare the Niji Pro to. It doesn't really match with anything, but there are aspects of it that I see in other brushes, and I kind of want to call that out because, I mean, frankly, one of the biggest issues I have with Fude brushes is you don't have any way of trialing these out. You're kind of um, limited to what you can see online and the reviews that people have online. So I just want to make this, I just want to give you as much information as I possibly can in case you are interested in this as to how it feels and what it does, because I think I had a very different idea of what this brush was before I had it in my hands. So to start at the beginning, originally when this brush was released, I think I watched a video or two about it because I thought it was a very, very pretty brush. And it was, just a Sonia G new release, and I always love to see them. But when everyone reviewed this and when I watched or read Sonia's blog post on this, this was very clearly meant to be a bronzer brush. And I don't use bronzer. I will probably never use bronzer. I don't have any use for that kind of a product. I think I'm too cool toned for it. But basically, everyone said use this for bronzer. It's the perfect bronzer brush. I think some people used it for contour as well. And again, I don't use contour. So I just kind of ignored this brush and decided it wasn't for me. And then I can't remember what I was watching or where I got this idea, but someone described this as a buffing brush, which makes sense. I mean, you do buff in bronzer, so that makes sense. But the way that they described this was very different from what I had heard before, and I was really interested in it. And so I picked this up and I agree. This is very much a buffing brush. And really the brush that this probably most reminds me of, well, it's actually a combination of brushes. It's almost as if you put together the Wayne Goss 00, not necessarily the shape, but how this is a rather large brush that can be very precise because of how it's shaped. Because it has this very, it comes to this very tapered tip. So I can get into all the nooks and crannies on my face with this, which is why I like using this as a setting powder brush, because I really struggle to use larger, fluffier, flatter brushes for that. So I like how large this is while being a really precise brush. And that's very much reflected in this brush as well, which is really surprising given the size. Like, this is a very large brush. This may be the largest brush in my collection. Actually, yes, it is. I think previously this had been my largest brush, which is the Yano series brush 2. I think this has been referred to as the spork brush. But you can see this is the Niji Pro is larger. I think this way the Yano series might still be a little bit larger, but I think altogether the Niji Pro is a larger brush. And also it's a much denser brush. Like this is a very fluffy brush. I don't know if you can see just how much like fluff there is to that. Like if you like pinch this together, it like is half the size. Whereas the Niji Pro, this is really dense. Like there's a lot of nice flow to it and everything, but like it's not fluff. Like you'd have to really compress it to press it down. Um, so this is very large, but at the same time, I use this for things that I use much smaller brushes for. Like I've used this in place of eyeshadow brushes before. That's part of the reason I have these out, and these are more here for a shape reference. But how I usually use the Wayne Goss E1, this is the large fluffy brush from his, I think it's called the first edition collection. I just use this for all over like matte powder or a satin eyeshadow on my eye. And I can do the same thing with this brush. And I have really small eyes. I mean, obviously it's going to give a very, like it's going to be like all over my eye socket, not necessarily just on my eyelid. But I'm comfortable using it for that. That's how small this gets. You can also put this into very small pans. Like I have, what is this? The Clinique, um, whatever these blushes are called. Like it can go into this pan very easily and pick up a lot of product because all parts of the brush surface of this are very dense. So it can go into pretty small pans. Like I can get this in an eyeshadow pan, and it can pull it out and apply it very evenly. So there's a lot of precision to this brush despite how big it is. But I actually do like how big it is too because like the original or the review that finally got me to get this brush said it was a buffing brush. It's very much like if you put these two brushes together or aspects of these two brushes together. It's large and specific like the Wayne Goss 00, but it's very dense and very buffery like the Face One. And I'm specifically saying Face One here, not the Buffer Pro. If I get to it today, I'm going to give a review on the 3 iterations of the Face One slash Buffer Pro because they're actually all very different brushes, and I actually don't like the Buffer Pro very much, which makes me very sad. Um, but the Niji Pro is actually much more like the original Face One in terms of its ability to buff things out than the Buffer Pro, in my opinion. Um, this buffs very, very well. It applies very evenly, and it buffs things out just to perfection. And the Niji Pro is the same in that respect, in that it applies powders however you scoop them out of whatever they're in. It applies powders very, very evenly, and then it can go through and buff them very nicely. I think the main difference between these two is going to be the shape of your buffing action. Um, the the Face One is a smaller brush, but because it's circular, I generally like using it in a circular fashion and buffing in this way. And so this doesn't work on my face to put on things like say highlight or blush because it would cover too large of an area if I am buffing it out in a circular fashion, which is why I like using Niji Pro for those things. This is really good for buffing things out on my cheek as opposed to all over my face because I can buff things out like this. Now this can also easily go in a circular fashion, but because of the way that I use this and the products that I use it for, I typically just, go back and forth and use it directionally in that way. And I really love this brush for that. This has made it much easier, or maybe not easier, but it's given me a different way of applying some of my favorite finishing powders and highlighters. Previously, I've been using my Hourglass powders almost exclusively with the Yano series number 2, which is perfect for putting on a really nice light layer of these powders, either on my cheeks or all over my face. But I'd never buffed out Hourglass powders onto my face. And I remember always being really confused when I would watch reviews of the Face One or Buffer Pro because people would constantly talk about buffing out finishing powders with this brush. And I had tried that before and it never really worked. It was kind of weird. I use the Face One specifically and really only for Bare Minerals powder foundation. That's all I use it for. I don't use this for finishing powder. However, I now understand what people are talking about because when I buff out my Hourglass powders with the Niji Pro, it just gives them a whole different dimension. Like, don't get me wrong, I still like being able to apply them with a lighter, fluffier brush all over my face or just on my cheeks. That is like one kind of finish. It's more of like a soft, more, I don't want to say powdery finish, but it's a more matte finish. It's a softer finish, but I can also take, and this is Moodlight, by the way. This is probably the more highlighty of the ambient lighting powders. I can buff this out on my cheeks and it looks like a highlighter. Not quite wet effect, but like very close to that. And it makes it look more glassy. It's just it gives it a very different finish. And that's not something I had ever really gotten before from any of my other brushes. And this is one of my favorite products. So I was really excited to be able to use this in a different way. It's just very new for me, you know? It's so cool when you can take a product that you really love and learn how to use it in a new way that, you also love. So now it's almost like I get two different powders out of this now, which I really love. In addition, some of my favorite highlighters are from Haus Labs, and I really, really wish that Haus Labs would come out with more of these. I'd really love to see one of these in like a cool toned lilac color or a cool toned pink color, because rose quartz is kind of peachy on me. But these, as much as I like these, they're a little bit finicky to apply with a brush. I've always applied these with my fingers. Anytime that I apply them with a brush, I find myself going in with my fingers after I apply with them with the brush. Um, just because there's a certain beautiful blurred out look that you can get with these when you use your fingers. But I can now use this brush to apply these highlighters. And it allows me to apply these highlighters in the variety of ways that I could with my fingers, meaning I can either apply this very lightly with this brush, using very little pigment and basically getting a non-pigmented glass sheen on my cheeks. But I can also use this to build this up to a straight up silver glow on my cheeks. And I say this because I've used this product with a lot of different brushes and it always ends up looking not bad, but just more powdery almost. I don't know how to describe it. Let me show you. Like if you use a finger, like you can get a really thin amount of this product. And you can come here and put it on, and if you use the heat and density of your finger, you can get just the most beautiful silver sheen that adds no texture and kind of blurs things out a bit. And you can also, really shear this out and get something that, or at least on my skin tone, this isn't silvery at this point, it's just a glass sheen. If you're warmer toned than me, you'd probably need to use a different color. But basically, it just gives you like, a glass skin effect. It's really pretty. And it's not, I think my camera's struggling to pick this up. But basically you get no silver color, you just get beautiful, blurred, but glassy sheen. It's beautiful. But if I use, well, this is a pretty firm brush. This is the Goss E1. If I use something like this, it ends up looking a little bit So it's, first of all, it's light. You can't, you will struggle to get to that like just straight up silver on the skin. But also it ends up looking like a little bit more powdery. There's something about this kind of application that just doesn't work as well for this product. Like it looks fine. It looks fine, but it never like gets to its full ability to look one with the skin that you get with your fingers. That is, unless you come in with the Niji Pro and you buff it out. And actually, I don't know if I have enough to really buff out so you can get the silver sheen. But it definitely gets a lot more blurred and you can build it up. And so this has just opened a lot of doors for my products that I didn't have before. And I'm just really happy that I picked this up because I had originally thought that this was, just a bronzing brush, or it was for use that I didn't have. But I really enjoy using this with highlighters. I enjoy using this with blushes. So if you're not someone who uses bronzers or contours, but you do use highlighters and blushes, I think that this can work just as well for you. Especially if you're someone like me who just straight up doesn't use contours or bronzers. Because I do find that sometimes I kind of use blushes not in the same way, but to contour my face a bit, um, but just in a different place. And this is really good for that because this can help you place down product, but then buff it out really nicely. And again, you can use a very small portion of this brush to lay down things in a really precise manner. And then you can come back with the full brush and blend it out, buff it out to a wider area. It's so versatile for how large it is. And I'm really, really pleased with this brush. I will say when I was considering buying this brush, I thought that I wouldn't need it, and I don't need any of my brushes. Like they're not needs. But I thought that I would already have everything that I needed with my fan brushes. So I think I have all of Sonia G's or at least the fan brushes that came in this original handle. I have these two and then the two smaller ones. And just looking at this, I kind of assumed that it would work the same way as a fan brush, even though I'm pretty sure multiple times in Sonia G's blog, she was like, this is not a fan brush. To me, it looks like a fan brush. So I'm going to think it kind of works as a fan brush. But one of the big differences between the Niji Pro and these fan brushes is kind of the way the sides are constructed. You can see with the Niji Pro, the ferrule wraps around. Like it's basically a big squished oval, kind of. But this wraps around the bristle. Whereas on the fan brushes, it doesn't really wrap around the bristle. You kind of have this V come down. It's like the ferrule is cut downwards. And so the bristle here at the end is not very firm. It's very soft and flippy and doesn't have a lot of integrity or stiffness. Um, and so whenever I have found myself using fan brushes, I always have to use the center. I always have to use this part of the brush because the further away you go from center, the less ability you have to like place down a product. These fan brushes seem to work in the way that you're placing down pigment or whatever you're placing down with the main part of this brush, and then the rest of the brush is kind of just there to help smooth it out as you're coming through and buffing things in or placing them down. But I find that this is really nice because you don't have that loss. Like you don't only have like a small part of this brush that you can use. You can use the whole head of the brush. Like all of this bristle space is very dense. And I don't want to say it's firm because it does have a lot of movement, but there is a lot of density here. It's a very soft, plush denseness, which again, reminds me of the original Face One. It's the reason I compare it to that so much in my mind. But it's nice because I don't have a small part of this brush that I can use. I can choose to use a small part of this brush, or I can use this whole face to buff out stuff on my skin. And I really like that. I feel a lot less limited by this brush than I do with my fan brushes. And I will also say I typically use, this is the Sculpt 4 for some of my harder pressed powders or like baked gelees, things that are hard to get out of the pan and that you kind of have to um, really buff in. I've used this in the past, but I have to say the Niji Pro works better on all accounts. It does a much better job at getting difficult products out of the pan. I would say it also lifts all products out of the pan in a very even manner. Not that I've ever had any issues with this. I think the only issues I've really had with the Sculpt 4 is I do have some products that are just very hard to pick out of the pan. And so I would have to dip in a lot with this one, whereas this one, this just goes in and scoops things up. So I find myself reaching for this a lot more, and I find myself reaching for this not as often. Really, all the use case that I had for this seems to be better taken care of with the Niji Pro. So I don't think that I'm going to get rid of my fan brushes. I do like them. I do think that this one in particular was probably made for more contour type things, which I don't use it for. But I will say, if I had gotten this brush before all of the fan brushes, I probably would not have picked up the fan brushes and I would not need them. So this is a very versatile brush and I'm really happy to have it in my collection. And if I ever do decide to downsize my collection, which I probably will at a certain point, once I kind of go through and figure out what all I enjoy, and figure out what maybe I don't need, this will help me pare things down a lot because it can do a lot. It can replace a lot of my brushes. I'm trying to see, I brought out this brush, but I don't know if I have too much to say about this. I was just bringing this out as another really dense brush because previously this was the only brush that I could use for my Clinique blushes. For me, these are really difficult products to get out of the pan. They're very hard and not powdery. And I feel like I just have to like go in with a really dense synthetic brush like this and just dig into them. But I feel like the Niji Pro does a better job. So my Saie brush may be out of a job if I don't if I don't need it specifically for my Clinique blushes, but we'll see. So just another note on the shape of this. It's part of the reason I brought these two eye brushes out is I don't have anything that really is shaped like this. The closest thing I have are my fan brushes, and they're like I showed you before, the ferrule isn't really shaped the same. So they don't function in the same way. But for someone who maybe hasn't held this before, um, the closest I have to compare the shapes are really these two brushes. This is the E1 from Goss, and then this is I believe it was called the Arched Worker from Sonia G's the Sunset Crane set. And so I think the closest one is going to be from Sunset Cranes. Obviously, these are two very, very different brushes with different bristle and different sizes and different use cases, but you can see they both have this arched ferrule. And I think in some ways that gives them a similar feel to the brushes, where the brush is big, but you can be really precise with it. Now, a big difference between these two that I don't think I realized until I had both of these brushes together is just how pinched in the Niji Pro is. The Arched Worker actually isn't pinched in that much, if at all. I kind of thought it was when I first looked at it, and to be fair, when I purchased the Niji Pro, I thought it was going to kind of look like a bigger version of this. So I was really surprised when I got this, and it was just like it's so pinched in, like it's just super compressed there. And I think that's part of what helps give this the buffing power that it has. is just because it's so scrunched together. But I like both of these because they're both very good at laying down powder in a very uh, even, uniform way. Obviously, this one's much more of a buffing brush, but I do think, like, if you can imagine a larger version of this brush that has um, more buffing power to the bristle, I think that that would be one way to imagine the brush if you don't have it in hand. The Wayne Goss E1 is going to be less similar. This one doesn't apply powders in quite the even fashion that the Niji Pro does. But I think that if you look at the shape of the brush, it kind of gives you a sense of what it looks like. Again, it's not going to it doesn't have that extreme pinching that the Niji Pro does. I think of them as kind of similar shapes of brushes, obviously very different sizes. But yeah, I'm really excited that I got this brush. This was a fantastic purchase. Which honestly, I picked this up on a whim, and I wasn't I wasn't sure how much I was going to like this brush. But this has become probably one of my most used brushes. It is right up there with my Wayne Goss 00 and my Sonia G Face One. If I didn't have any other face brushes than these three, I would be fine. I am quite happy with these three, which is saying a lot. These two have been easily my most used brushes. And so for this to come in and basically be number three, that's a lot. That's saying a lot. So I think that's everything I have to say. I thought I had more things, but I didn't write notes for this video. But if you have any questions on the Niji Pro, let me know below, and I will get back to your question as soon as I can. And if you watch this all the way through, thank you so much for hanging out with me and listening to me ramble on about brushes. I really appreciate it. And I hope to see you in the next video. So until then, goodbye.